project. In other words, stakeholders are those with any interest in your project outcome. They are typically the members of a project team, project managers, executives, project sponsors, customers, and users. So the success of any project depends largely on the satisfaction of these persons. Understanding the needs and expectations of stakeholders is very, very important for successful project execution. You might ask, are these guys really important? Are they really necessary? Well, the answer to that is a resounding yes. You know why? Basically, stakeholders often provide invaluable expertise about the project. They have sound understanding of the relevant process and how things work in the industry. So based on their experience, they can provide clear deliverables and identify project constraints that the project managers might not be aware of. So you see, stakeholders are very important individuals or group of persons. Now, how can they be managed? Okay. Project stakeholder management. This process supports the work of the project team to analyze stakeholders' expectations, assess the degree to which they impact or are impacted by the project, and develop strategies to effectively engage stakeholders in support of project decisions and the planning and execution of the work of the project. The project stakeholder management processes are: 1. Identify stakeholders. This process identifies project stakeholders regularly, analyzes and documents relevant information regarding their interests, involvement, interdependencies, influence, and potential impact on project success. 2. Plan stakeholder engagement. This is the process of developing approaches to involve project stakeholders based on their needs, expectation, interest, and potential impact on the project. 3. Manage stakeholder engagement. This is the process of communicating and working with stakeholders to meet their needs and expectations, address issues, and foster appropriate stakeholder engagement involvement. And then lastly, 4. Monitor stakeholder engagement. This is the process of monitoring project stakeholder relationships and tailoring strategies for engaging stakeholders through the modification of engagement strategies and plan. So here we are looking at the 4 ways of managing project stakeholders. One way is to identify them, then plan how you can get them effectively engaged, manage your engagement with them, and lastly, closely monitor your engagement with them. Essentially, project stakeholder management is a process of maintaining good relationships with the people who have the most impact on your work. Communicating with each one in the right way can play a vital role in keeping them on board. Now, let's take a closer look at the 4 ways to manage project stakeholders. Okay, would consider the key concept of project stakeholder management. Okay, so the stakeholder identification and management should commence as soon as possible after the project charter has been approved. The project manager has been assigned and the team begins to form. The process of identifying and engaging stakeholders for the benefit of the project is iterative. Okay, when we say something is iterative, it means that that thing or the process is continuous, all right? Okay. So the activities of identification, prioritization, and engagement should be reviewed and updated routinely, and at least at the following times when: 1, the project moves through different phases in its life cycle. 2, current stakeholders are no longer involved in the work of the project. And 3, new stakeholders become members of the project stakeholder community. All right, so this is worthy of note. Now let's isolate these 4 project stakeholder management processes and discuss them one after the other. Okay, here's the first part. We start with inputs. Here we have the inputs, tools and techniques and outputs. I'm sorry that the chat is small and you might have a hard time seeing it, but some of the things in the chat have been mentioned earlier in the previous classes, so I will not deliberate on them. However, if you have gotten the project management book of knowledge, you will find it in Identify Project Stakeholder page, but I'll summarize the chats. Okay, identify stakeholders is the process of identifying project stakeholders regularly and analyzing and documenting relevant information regarding their interests, involvement, interdependencies, influence, and potential impact on project success. So before managing a stakeholder, you must first of all be able to identify him or who they are. They are, you could just ask yourself, are they executives, the sponsors of the project, the customer or user of the product? Identify them. The purpose of doing that is to maximize positive influences and minimize potential negative impacts. So essentially, when these guys are satisfied and happy, it translates into the success of your project and money in your pockets. So you see why they are very important, right? But what really is the benefit of identifying these key players? The key benefit of this process is that it enables the project team to identify the appropriate focus for engagement of each stakeholder or group of stakeholders. This process frequently occurs from the first time in the project, either prior to or at the same time the project charter is developed and approved. It is repeated as necessary, but should be performed at the start of each phase and when a significant change in the project or the organization occurs. Okay, so what this simply means is that the benefit of identifying the stakeholders is so as you could know who you and your team should focus on. Focusing on the wrong set of people will not give you any positive results. But after you've been able to ascertain who the right set of persons are and are given the right kind of attention that they require, that will put you on the right step to the right direction. And you must remember that identifying stakeholders must be performed at the start of each phase and when a significant change in project or organization occurs. Now, each time the identification process is repeated, the project management plan components and project documents should be consulted to identify relevant project stakeholders. Okay, so here we're going to identify the stakeholders. Okay, so here are the steps to identifying stakeholders. 1, data gathering. One way to gather data is by brainstorming. It is a general data gathering and creativity technique that elicits input from groups such as team members or subject matter experts. Okay, and what are these inputs? Basically, they find answers to questions such as who is directly or indirectly involved with the project? What gains or who gains or loses in the project? Who wants to complete the project successfully? Who are the suppliers? Who will use the project's deliverables? Who has the authority to provide support? And who can cause the project to fail? The answer to these pertinent questions would help you to properly identify your stakeholders, and you can get this through brainstorming. But please note that brainstorming is not done by a single person. but by a group of persons. 2, project charter. A project charter appoints the project manager and officially starts the project. This document contains other high-level information like the name of the project manager, client, sponsor, other influential stakeholders. Okay, so I'm sure this is self-explanatory. So you can find the names of important stakeholders from this document. 3, contract documents. The contract agreement can give you the, okay, this is not letting me see the screen, of local agents and contacts from the clients. Okay, so you can record the stakeholders' information in the stakeholder register because it contains stakeholders' name, title, interest, power, requirements, and expectation. Then we have a number 4, OAP and EEF. Reviewing the enterprise environmental factors, EEF, and organizational assets process, OAP, such as the stakeholder register and lessons learned documents, reviewing governmental regulations and industry standards, can review many stakeholders. So you can record the stakeholders' information in the stakeholder register because it contains stakeholders' name, title, interest, power, requirements, and expectation. Okay, and then number 5, we have interview with experts. Interview the stakeholder to learn about possible stakeholders and their potential roles. Okay, so as much as this is a great idea, it is not always used because it is both time consuming and expensive. So at the end of the day, you might not get the main information you seek. So after identifying them, the next step is plan stakeholder engagement. The stakeholder engagement uses a technique known as mapping representation to help you know where to place the stakeholders and how to relate with them. Okay, so this is a method of categorizing stakeholders using various data. This keeps closing my screen. Categorizing stakeholders assists the team in building relationships with the identified stakeholders. Common methods include power interest grid, power influence grid, or impact influence grid. Each of these techniques supports a grouping of stakeholders according to their level of authority or power, level of concern about the project's outcome or interest, ability to influence the outcome of the project, influence, or ability to cause changes in the project's planning or execution. These classification models are useful for small projects or for projects with simple relationships between stakeholders and the project or within the stakeholder community itself. Okay, so we're going to see how this really works. This is the map. This is the map. All right, so the position you allocate to a stakeholder or the grid shows you the action you need to take with them. As we go through this path together, please, I'd like you to have a mental picture of your workplace. As an employee, if you don't understand this power interest grid, you always have problems with your boss. The reason why most people have problems with their employers or other staff at their workplace is because they have not been able to identify where these people stand individually in the power interest grid. I'll say that again. The reason why most people have problems with their employers or other staff at their workplace is because they have not been able to identify where these people stand individually in the power interest grid. So understanding this mapping will give you wisdom. Applying the wisdom is knowledge. And knowledge in turn is what? power. All right, so let's go. Okay, so you can see the screen, right? Here we have the high power low and low interest high. We're going to explain all of that. So basically what this map is explaining is if a person has high power interests, you need to manage his expectation closely. That means you must fully engage him and make the greatest effort to satisfy him. And that is because he has high power and high influence over your projects and your project and high interest in them. Okay, so he is a decision maker who's got the biggest impact on the project success. The people in this category are mostly employers and high interest stakeholders. Okay, but what if he has high power and low interest? What do you do? Right now, you're still painting, you're still having that mental picture, right? I hope we're all together. Understanding this would really solve a lot of problems for you. So please, let's do this together. Are you still having that mental picture? Okay, so if you do, picture your boss, your employer, okay? All right, and then ask yourself, does he have high power and low interest? If he does, what would you do? The power interest grid says that you should keep him satisfied. That means you don't have to bore him with so much information. This kind of person is not interested in how you got the job done, how you had to be proactive and creative, and the details of the steps you took to eventually get the job done. No. All they care about is the job done? Yes, sir, it is. Oh, okay, that's great. Thank you very much. Case closed. Most employers, direct bosses, managers, or team heads are in this category. You need to be careful when you deal with these kind of persons because they could use their power in a negative way if they feel they are left unsatisfied. Okay, now here's a nutcracker. Another group of persons in this category are babies. Did you know that babies are high power and low interest stakeholders? They can choose to cry in the middle of the night to draw your attention to the fact that they need to be fed without considering the timing, whether it's okay or not for you. They don't even care if you need to get some sleep. No, they don't. Because maybe you're tired or you had a long day or not. No, they don't even listen when you try to explain to them at that point when they're screaming at the top of their tiny voice that you really need to get some rest or maybe a suggestion that they should just hold on to money to get their breakfast. I mean, I've never tried that before, but I believe it will not work. So, but if you are a mother in this class right now listening to this lecture, tell us if that sort of negotiation would work. Like your baby is crying, he needs your attention, and you're tired, you can't feed the baby at that time, and you just go to the baby and be like, baby, is it possible you just stop crying because I'm so tired, I need to sleep, I had a long day, my body aches, just keep quiet, you're waking up everybody, could you just stop crying? Okay, I'll attend to you in the morning. Okay, if it's possible, please let us know. I'm sure a lot of people would like to learn how to handle that technique. But if you are a father, please tell us in the chat room if you think it's a brilliant idea to negotiate with your baby when he needs his mom in the middle of the night. I hope you can all agree with me that the moment you provide a baby with what they need and they're satisfied, they're good, right? I think so too. Now, if you know of another group of persons you think fall under this category, please share your thoughts in the chat room. I really would want to see. I would want to see. Okay. All right. So let's move forward, please. Not possible, right? I agree with you, Trustling. Okay. So now what if he has low power and high interests? Low power and high interest. The power grid says you should keep him informed. That means you need to adequately inform him of your activities. Talk to him to ensure that no major issues arise. People in this category can often be very helpful with the details of your project. They might not have the power to influence anything, but they can point you to the right direction or provide you with useful information or bright ideas. People in this category are your family members. When you're back from work and they ask you, how was work today? That single question shows that they have high interest in what you do. Now, after you finish telling them how terrible, sadistic, unappreciative, egocentric, and selfish your boss is, they don't have the power to sack your boss. Neither can they directly influence him to act differently, but they can provide you with ideas on how you can cope with the situation or encourage you to quit the job in a worst case scenario. Okay, so what if the person has low power and low interests? As you can see in the chart here, low power, low interests. Okay, what do? The power interest grid says that you should monitor him, but do not spend time and energy with excessive communication with that person because, in all honesty, they do not really matter. In your opinion, I don't know, who do you think falls under this category? Who do you think falls under this category of people who have low power and low interests? Okay, definitely it can't be your boss. There should be other people in this category. If you can identify them, I really want you to share your thoughts in the chat room. Okay, so following through with your mental picture and placing these people in their respective levels would help you to deal with them accordingly. Now that we have seen the different levels of the power interest grid, I hope you've been able to identify where each person stands. Just having that same mental picture, you now know where you place your boss, you now know where you place your team members, you know where you place the gatesman, you know where you place the driver, you know where you place the cleaner, you know where you place everyone, right? So understanding how to deal with these people would help you to avoid problems. You won't have to clash with anyone because you already know where they stand and how to deal with them accordingly. So that is the power of this power interest grid. It helps you to know what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. So it is also very important that you categorize the stakeholders, okay? There are 3 categories of stakeholder. We have the primary stakeholders. Okay, so these are the beneficiaries, direct concerned persons like farmers, children, elderly people, and the others. 2, secondary stakeholders. These are intermediaries who serve in the process of delivering aid to primary stakeholders like professionals, advisors, practitioners, consultants, experts, public and private sector organizations, NGOs, and the likes. 3rd, we have the tertiary or external stakeholders, such as these are people like decision makers, they are policy makers, like politicians, senior civil servants, direct district level bodies, governmental bodies, and others like that. Okay, so we've considered the 3 categories of stakeholder management. Okay. We have said earlier that managing stakeholder engagement, that it is the process of communicating and working with stakeholders to meet their needs and expectations, address issues, and foster appropriate stakeholder engagement involvement, right? Okay. Now, the benefit of this process is that it allows the project manager to increase support and minimize resistance from stakeholders, thereby significantly increasing the chances of achieving project success. The 3 processes of doing this are: 1, inputs. Here we have the stakeholders management plan, the communication management plan, the change log, organization process assets. And 2, we have tools and techniques. Here we have the communication methods. There are lots of ways to communicate with stakeholders, and this includes meetings, status reports, newsletters, SMS, letters, emails, websites. Okay, so the combination of these methods will depend on your particular project and the needs of your stakeholder. Okay, then we also have the interpersonal skills, management skills, and then third, we have the outputs. Here we have the issue log, change request, project management plan updates, project documents updates, organizational process assets updates. So as soon as you give priority to your stakeholders, you can then start to develop a plan on how you communicate with them and give each person or group of persons the right level of information with the right frequency. Now, the next step is monitor stakeholder engagement. So far, we've discussed 3 out of the 4 processes of project stakeholder management, right? The first is identify project stakeholders. Okay. The second is plan stakeholder management. So I want to be sure that we've been following this class. Please, can someone tell us the third process we just considered? The third process that we just considered. We have examined, identify stakeholders, plan stakeholder management, and we just examined the third one now. We're just about to proceed to the fourth one. What's the third one that we just talked about? Please, I would like to see your response in the chat room. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so if your answer is manage stakeholder engagement, you are absolutely correct. All right, now we are considering the fourth and the last part of the process, that is monitor stakeholder engagement. This is the process of monitoring project stakeholder relationships and tailoring strategies and plans. The key benefit of this process is that it maintains or increases the efficiency and effectiveness of stakeholder engagement activities as the project evolves and its environment changes. This process is performed throughout the project. The 3 processes of doing these are: 1, inputs. Here we have the project management plan. The project management plan includes resource management plan. This helps to identify the method for team member management. Then again, we have communication management plan. This describes the plans and strategies for communication to the project stakeholders. And then again, we have the stakeholder engagement plan. This defines the plan for managing stakeholders' needs and expectation. Okay, so we have considered this one. Let's proceed. We have the project documents. Project documents that can be considered as inputs for this process includes issue log, lessons learned register, project communication. This has been discussed extensively in the project communication management class. Okay, so the terms are very familiar to you. I would not need to elaborate on them. Okay, but essentially this includes the basic, the project communication that has been distributed to stakeholders as defined in the communication management plan and the stakeholder engagement plan. Then again, we have the risks register and stakeholder register. Okay. Okay, and then again, we have the work performance data. Work performance data contains data on project status, such as which stakeholder are supportive of the project and their level and type of engagement. Okay, this is very understandable, right? Work performance data. Okay, it helps you to know who is doing what and how. Okay, now enterprise environmental factor. The enterprise environmental factors that can influence the monitor stakeholder engagement process includes organizational culture, political climate, and governance framework. Then we have the personnel administration policies, stakeholder risk thresholds, established communication channels, global, regional, or local trends, practices or habits, and geographic distribution of facilities and resources. And we have the organizational process assets. The organizational process assets that can influence, monitor stakeholder engagement process includes corporate policies and procedures for social media ethics and security. Okay, so if you are having, if you want to monitor, if you want to monitor your communication with your stakeholder, you have to be sure what the corporate policies are, what the procedures for social media and ethics are, and then the security. Because if you don't consider these things, you might end up trying to do the right thing in the wrong way. And at the end of the day, you will violate serious policies that would hinder you from the progress or the success that you've been trying to achieve. So this is very important. Organizational process assets should be considered. Okay, then the corporate policies and procedures for the issue, risks, change, and data management should be considered as well. Organizational communication requirements. Okay, different organizations have their communication requirements. What works for organization A might not work for communicating with organization B. So you have to study them to be sure which one works for which. Okay, so if you understand this, then you'll be able to monitor your communication with them. You'll be able to monitor your engagement with them. Standardized guidelines for development, exchange, storage, and retrieval of information, and historical information from previous projects. So when you have all this information to help you, to guide you to do the right thing so you don't make mistakes. Now that brings us to the end of monitor stakeholder engagements. No, not monitor stakeholder engagement. It's the end of organizational process assets. Okay. All right, so now we have tools and techniques. Here we have the data analysis. Data analysis techniques that can be used for this process includes alternative analysis. Alternative analysis can be used to evaluate options to respond to variances in the desired results of stakeholder engagements. Okay, so when you have options, it is important that you analyze them to know which of them would produce the desired results to suit your stakeholder expectation. Okay, all right, then again, we have the root cause analysis. A root cause analysis can be used to determine the basic underlying reason that stakeholder engagement is not having the planned effects. I'm going to read this again. A root cause analysis can be used to determine the basic underlying reason that stakeholder engagement is not having the planned effects. So let's assume you have a headache, okay? What most people do is to quickly go for painkillers like Panadol, okay? But what that does is to stop the effects, but not the root cause of the problem. The headache is just an alarm system of the body telling you that something is wrong somewhere. So if you stop the alarm, you have not solved the problem, because sometimes the headache will get to resurface again. But taking care of the underlying cause of the headache would solve the root cause of the problem. So, in the same vein, a root cause analysis can be used to determine the basic underlying reason that stakeholder engagement is not having the planned effects. Please take note of this. It is very, very imperative that this data analysis is properly taken into consideration. Okay. Now, again, we have the stakeholder analysis. The stakeholder analysis helps to determine the position of stakeholder groups and individuals at any particular time in the project. So basically, the stakeholder analysis will help you know where exactly to place a stakeholder or the stakeholder group. Okay, is it supposed to be categorized where, and then the individuals at any time of the project, it should be properly categorized. These categories of different placement of stakeholders or the position of stakeholders will help you know how to manage these people, and to also help you know how exactly to make use of the data you get, or even how to go about getting the data that you would require for your project. Decision making. Decision making techniques that can be used for this process includes multi-criteria decision analysis. Criteria for successful stakeholder engagement are prioritized and weighed to identify the most appropriate choice. Then again, we have the voting. Voting can be used to select the best response for a variance in stakeholder engagement. Okay, so everyone comes around, maybe it's your team, the team members, and then you ask them to, we're going to vote. We use the voting system to know what exactly or how exactly we are supposed to function or relate with a certain stakeholder. Okay, so, with the voting, it helps you to know without bias how to go about what you should do with your stakeholder, how to properly engage them. Okay, so they all form parts of the decision-making technique. It's either you do the multi-criteria decision analysis or you employ the voting system to help you know what to do. And then again, we have the data representation. A data representation technique used in this process includes, but is not limited to, a stakeholder engagement assessment matrix. The stakeholder engagement assessment matrix monitors stakeholder engagement through tracking changes in the level of engagement for each stakeholder. Okay. All right, so we have communication skills. Communication techniques can be used in, okay, I can't see this. I hope you can see it. I don't know, something is just blocking the screen. I can't see that part. All right, so if you can see it, I'm good. Feedback. Feedback is used to ensure that the information to stakeholders is received and understood. Feedback is used to ensure that the information to stakeholders is received and clearly understood. Okay, so when you tell someone that you need to get feedback, and that means that you have sent an information and you're expecting a response. So the response will help you to know if the information you passed earlier was clearly understood. If it was not understood, you would get to find out when the feedback comes. Presentations. Presentations provide clear information to stakeholders, interpersonal and team skills. Okay? Then the interpersonal skills to that can be used for this process. The interpersonal skills to that can be used for this process include active listening. Active listening is used to reduce misunderstanding and other miscommunication. We handled this part in the last class in project communication management, where we talked about the different ways of communicating with your project stakeholders, how to be sure that you're getting an active listener, or to be able to ascertain if your stakeholder is passively listening to you or is effectively listening to you. Okay, so active listening here is used to be sure that you reduce misunderstanding and other miscommunication issues that might arise. Okay, then again, we have cultural awareness. Cultural awareness and cultural sensitivity help the project manager to plan communications based on the cultural differences and requirements of stakeholders and team members. Okay, so the culture of the environment will help you know what exactly you're supposed to do. Okay, are you in an environment where you're supposed to, where when you're expressing when you want to show that you respect someone, you have to greet them in a certain way, you address them in a certain way, you talk to them in a certain way. Okay, you have to put that into consideration. We're talking about communication skills here. So you have to be aware of what works in that in the cultural setting of these people. You have to be aware, because if you are not, you might end up trying to say the right thing but in the wrong way. So you'll be communicating, but you'll be doing it the wrong way, and at the end of the day, you get into serious trouble. You might not even get you might not even get the response you need, not because you didn't say what you should have said, but because you were not aware of the culture that surrounds communication. So this is really very important. Leadership. Successful stakeholder engagement requires strong leadership skills to communicate the vision and inspire stakeholders to, I can see this, the work and outcomes of the project. Okay, so you have to have very strong leadership skill, because it's going to help you to communicate effectively when talking to your stakeholders. They need to know that you're confident in what you're saying. They need to see that you're inspiring them, to take the right step and do the right thing. They need to see in you that you're sure of what you're doing. So when they feel that within you, it's easy for you to uh, how do I put it now? It's easy for you to get them to react the way you want them to react, because they see in you that you're sure of what you're doing. So usually people are more they're more trusting of people who are sure of what they're doing. People who have very good leadership skills are usually more able to coordinate people or others better than those who do not have leadership skill. So leadership skills, very important. Networking. Networking assures access to information about levels of engagement of stakeholders. Okay, we understand what networking is, right? All right, political awareness. Political awareness is used to understand the strategies of the organization, understand who wields power and influence in the arena, and to develop an ability to communicate with these stakeholders. You've heard about office bureaucracy, right? Okay. There's politics in a lot of workplace today, a lot of politics in workplace. So if you are aware of this, you're aware of who exactly is the influencer, who exactly you need to go to, who exactly you need to talk to, who can influence things and make it happen. You're aware of, who is what in your organization. It helps you to develop an ability to communicate with the right person. But if you're not aware of who is what, then that's a big challenge. So political awareness is important. Then again, we have the meetings. Types of meetings includes status meetings, stand-up meetings, retrospectives, and other meetings as agreed upon in the stakeholder engagement plan to monitor and assess stakeholder engagement levels. Okay, so you have to be sure what works for the stakeholder, what kind of meeting is appropriate for the stakeholder. So if the stakeholder tells you, okay, the kind of meeting we want is the face-to-face meeting, and then you decide, no, let's do audio conference meeting, you might not get the best results. So you have to follow what really they need. Remember that stakeholders are very important, yes? They're really very important. You have to keep them satisfied if you want to get the best results. So if they say, we want this, try as much as possible to do what they ask you to do so you can get the best results, okay? And meetings are no longer limited by face-to-face or voice-to-voice interactions. You can agree with me that there are lots of other ways you can have meetings. They have the teleconferencing and technology, that has been able to bridge the gap and provide numerous ways to connect with people. For example, you can't see me right now, and I can't see you. I don't even know if you are sitting or standing or lying down. The best I can do is to guess. Okay. But even with that, I'm sure I'll be wrong, 95% of the time. And that's because we are having, we are interacting. Yes, you can hear me. And when you're muted, I'll be able to hear you too. We do not need to necessarily be in a physical classroom where I get to see you eye to eye and then ask you questions and then you answer and you see what I'm doing. We don't necessarily have to do that right now. With the latest technologies coming up, it is possible for you to have meetings with as many people as possible, 50 people, 100 persons, and then you communicate and you pass information and everyone gets the message and we're all happy, okay? So you could also consider making use of this to our advantage. All right, again, we have the monitor stakeholder engagements. Here, under here, we have the outputs. This time, we're talking about outputs. In the output, we have work performance information. Work performance information includes information about the status of stakeholder engagements, such as the level of current project support, and compared to the desired levels of engagement as defined in the Stakeholder Engagement Assessment Matrix, Stakeholder Cube, or other tools. Right. Then we have the change requests. I'm sure you've heard this term over and over and over again in project management. It's a change request that may include corrective and preventive actions to improve the current level of stakeholder engagement. I'm sure you're aware of this already. Change requests are processed for review and disposition through the Perform Integrated Change Control process. This term was mentioned at least 5 times this afternoon, earlier today. Okay, then we have the project management plan update. How do I get this out? Finally. Any change to the project management plan goes through the organization's change control process via a change request. Components of the project management plan that may require a change request include resource management plan. This is necessary because team responsibilities for stakeholder engagement activities may need to be updated. Okay. Another is communication management plan. The project's communication strategies may need to be updated as well. And then again, the stakeholder engagement plan. Information about the project stakeholder community may need to be updated. Now, all of these are areas that needs to be managed. If a new information comes about resource management plan, then the previous information you had on that subject matter has to be updated. If a new information comes that has to do with communication strategies, the one you had before becomes old. To make it new, you need to get it updated. What about when you have a new information on stakeholder community? Maybe a new person has joined the stakeholder community, or there are new stakeholders right now. Whatever you had before becomes outdated, so you have to update so that all this can be properly managed, and then you can get to monitor your work effectively. All right, so this is the end of monitor stakeholder engagements. And also, it is the end of project stakeholder management module. It will interest you to know that we have successfully covered the whole project management book of knowledge. But that is not the end of our class. We still have an additional module that the program director will talk to you about. So we're done with the class. Feel free to ask questions if you have anything that you would like to talk about. If you have any questions, please ask your questions. Thank you. Dr. Benito? Okay, I'm seeing some okay. All right, please if you have your question, I'd like to have them here in the chat room. Can you hear me? Please, if you can hear me, I'd like to see your response in the chat room, because I'm beginning to think I've been talking to myself. Can you hear me? All right, thank you so much. Thank you very, very much. So do you have questions? If you do, please, I'd like to have your questions. No questions?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. Thank you very much, Princess. I think Mr. Benito is in another class, and so I will just ask him to coordinate a little bit. So please, if you have your questions, kindly raise your hand. You'll be unmuted so that you can ask your questions. But before then, we want to appreciate Princess for this wonderful lecture. Please, if you appreciate the lecture, please just say thank you, Princess, on the chat room. If you say thank you on the chat room, thank you, Princess, for this wonderful lecture. If you know you understood everything. And please, if you have questions, kindly raise your hands and you shall be unmuted so that you can ask your questions immediately. All right. Okay, do we have questions, please? Do we have questions? Do we have questions? I've been seeing a hand here by Cassimi. Let me unmute you, then you ask your question. Princess, can you unmute Cassimi?
Okay.
His hands have been up on this one. Is he unmuted?
Kasimi, okay. Yeah, Mr. Kasimi, you are unmuted. Please go ahead.
Please unmute your mic, Mr. Kasimi, and ask your question.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I want to thank the presenter for the well done job. Everything was very, very clear. My question was the cultural awareness she was talking about. I want her to give us one example, typical example to explain to us what she means by that cultural. Can you hear me?
Please,
Yes, we
your
can hear
line,
you.
line is breaking, but just say the question again, please.
Okay, I appreciate, I really love the presentation very well. It was very clear, very good. But there was a problem about that cultural awareness. I want her to give a typical example to explain more so that we can know what he talking about the cultural awareness. What will be the cultural awareness he's talking about? Cultural awareness.
Okay, I understand your question. I'm going to answer that. Okay, so basically what it's saying is that, you know, at some places where you can't address people directly by their names, you would have to acknowledge their title before talking to them. In some places, you would need to do some sort of gesture before when you're greeting, like you probably would need to prostrate or kneel or something. Okay, in some cultures, you cannot have a handshake with the opposite sex. You can't do that. So let's say you're coming from a place where it's okay to have handshakes with people, and then as a man, you get into this place, and then you have a stakeholder who is a woman, and then you want to have a handshake with this person. Culturally, it is very wrong. So attention will no longer be focused on the reason why you're there. The attention will be focused on why you are not aware of the culture that you cannot have a handshake with a woman. There's so many examples like that. You asked for one, I just gave you one now. There's so many examples like that. So the cultural sensitivity must be taken into cognizance before you engage in communication with your stakeholders. Be sure what works for them. If shaking hands works, please go ahead, shake hands. If calling them by their names work, please do that. If it doesn't, please respect what the culture says so you can have a free flow of communication with them. Have I answered your question, Mr. Kazumi, please?
Very well. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay, do we have any other questions?
Yes, we have, I think we have Wisdom DK. She's a Wisdom DK. Please unmute.
Wisdom DK, you're unmuted.
Okay, are you hearing me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Good. Stakeholder and management is very important in every project and well delivered. I enjoyed this class. Now, if we consider what happens in some major projects being undertaken by these oil multinationals and sometimes some of these companies, not necessarily oil multinationals, you find out that some critical stakeholders, quote and unquote, critical stakeholders within communities can stall projects if they are not properly engaged. My question is, where will you categorize some group of youths who call themselves militants or who call themselves Boko Haram? Are we going to categorize them as stakeholders or as criminals and then put them under risk as part of the risk factors? Or are we going to deal with them as stakeholders and still manage their risk? Thank you.
Okay, that's a very interesting question you asked.
Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hello?
I can hear you. Hello, can you hear me?
Just go ahead, Princess. Just go ahead and answer.
Okay. All right. So answering your question now. Please, Mr. Wisdom Dicky. Okay, so you've been able to identify that there's some people who could wield some sort of influence, and you've categorized them in a certain manner. But to answer your question, I'd like you to answer it yourself. When you look at these people, where do you think they fall? Where do you think they fall under when you look at the mapping? Do you think that they have low power and high interests? Let's go back to the mapping so you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. Do you think they have low power and high interests? Or do you think that they have high power and high interests? Do you think that they have, okay, we're almost there. All right. Do you think they have high power or low interests? Do you think that they have low power and low interests? Do you think that they have low interest but high power? If you follow the mapping, then you were able to have that mental picture I told you about, you'll be able to adequately place this set of people where they lie, where they're supposed to be. And then it's also going to help you know how to deal with them, because whether you like it or not, anyone who has an interest in a project, anyone who has a certain level of power, anyone who has a certain level of interest, power, and what again? Those people are stakeholders. Okay. Now, whether people like to see it that way or not, as long as they can actually influence decisions, they can actually do something about the situation, either positively or negatively, they are stakeholders. Okay. So according to the mapping, please, you could help in answering the question yourself. Where do you think they lie? Where they lie would help you know how to manage them. Because if you do not manage them properly, they will not allow you to handle your project well. I gave an example of a baby. I don't know if you remember the example I gave of a baby. A baby has high power but low interest. Remember? Okay, and explains that if you don't keep a baby satisfied, you will not have peace. Okay, so that is how you get to know where to place a person, considering the level of power the person wields and the level of interest the person wields. I hope I've been able to answer your question, sir.
All right, Princess. Let me also add to your answer. All right, I'm privileged to work in the Amnesty Office, the Presidential Amnesty Office, and where we handle the human capital development for the ex-militants, those who surrender their arms to the program so that they can, some of them are being sent to school, some of them are given vocational, trainings and what have you. Now, you made mention of the Boko Haram militants, and you made mention of the agitators, Niger Delta, what have you. Now, those are two different sets of people. Now, we dealing with those ex-militants. They are actually indigenous of that land. And whatever project is being carried out on that land affects them. So, and because those projects affect them and affect the environment where they live, they are stakeholders of that environment. So whether you like it or not, you must carry them along. And you know what happened when the late president started the amnesty program. They were neglected for a long while, and they started the agitations, and by the wisdom of the late president, they inaugurated the amnesty program. So you discover that because those oil companies they have been, using the resources in that area, and there has been serious neglect and damage to the area, and you can see that all these people are all stakeholders, because whatever projects that have been carried out in that area, whatever mineral resources that have been tapped in that area affects them. So they are all stakeholders, and you must bring them along, bring them to the table, and ensure that their interest is taken care of. Without that, you wouldn't have been able to have peace in the Niger Delta region. So all these people that are indigenous in that place are all stakeholders. So you must consider them. It doesn't matter who is representing them. Of course, you have some set of people representing them as their leaders, and they may not carry them along, but you have to carry everybody along so that you can achieve the success of that project. So I believe your question should have been answered by now. Please, if your question is answered, you can also indicate the chat room.
Okay, thank you. I just unmuted Mr. Mohammed. Please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay. Hello. Good evening, Princess.
Good evening, Mr. Mohammed.
Thank you very much. I think I want to tilt this same question of stakeholder management to a merchandise project in a market where a factory or a manufacturing industry produce an enterprise, and the engagement of stakeholders like the dealers and the retailers. So in the cultural, I want to know more on the culture of such two parties, both the dealers and the retailers. Will the factory engage them on the same cultural norms? What I mean here is this, that in the field of delivering the enterprise to those stakeholders, so will the company also adapt the culture of the market irrespective of their speculations? I don't know if you capture my question.
No, I don't quite get the question.
Can you come again with that question, please?
I don't quite get the question.
Okay, to direct the question, actually, I mean, what is the actual culture of a manufacturing industry to that of the dealers? Because we have witnessed a lot of problems. Oh, come on. Oh. Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good. I lost my connection. Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Very good. We witnessed an experience in a certain point. I mean, sorry, between the company and the buyers, then the dealers. Sometimes the culture, they will tell you that no, this enterprise we may not need it here, and the other people were like, oh no, we need the enterprise. So in the point of culture, should we just adopt the same approach of providing the same enterprise which party A likes, contrary to party B?
Okay. Do you understand the question?
Oh God, I lost my contact. Hello?
Yes.
The connection the connection is not so clear, so I was really finding it difficult to get the question. Please, can you put this in the chat so I'll be able to read it?
Type the question on the chat room.
Yes.
I think what he's trying to also say again, you have a product, and the retailers also having controversial opinions about the product that it doesn't meet up to their culture and what have you. So do you now produce what will be acceptable to them in accordance with their culture or something? I believe that's what he's trying to say.
Okay, if that's what he's trying to say, then you should understand that your stakeholders are very important. They wield very high influence, and they're decision makers as well. So if you go ahead and produce something that, okay, let me give you an example. There are some places where the culture forbids them to eat certain food, like pigs or catfish or something. So let's say you work you are a project manager, and then you decided that, okay, I want to do a product, And from my own country or where I come from or my own culture, it's okay to eat catfish and pig. And so you decided to take samples of these things to make a product for these people. Now, these people have a culture that forbids eating of this product. At the end of the day, if you are not culturally sensitive, if you are not aware of their culture, then your product will not sell. Your product will not be bought in the market. And at the end of the day, you're going to have a lot of failure in the project. So considering what your stakeholders want, keeping them happy and satisfied means you have to be sure what the culture forbids, what the culture allows, the kind of product you should manufacture for them or produce for them that they will be happy to make use of. Remember, at the end of the day, the product is not meant for you. It's meant for your consumers. It's meant for the end users, that is the customers. Now, if you have this product and your customers are not satisfied, they're not happy with it, then your project is a huge failure. So you have to consider these people. They play a very integral part in the success of whatever project you are embarking on. So yes, you have to consider that. Have I answered your question, please?
I believe your question has been answered. Mohammed, please, you can indicate in the chat room if you are satisfied with the answer. All right, we have Troslyn. Please, can you unmute Troslyn so that she can ask her question?
Okay. Okay, you're muted now.
Troslyn, please go ahead.
Okay. Good evening, all.
Good evening,
Hello?
Kathleen. I can hear you.
Okay. All right. I want to still buttress on that categories of stakeholders that somebody asks about, maybe miscreants, Boko Haram, and maybe militias or something. Now, I want to ask that, can a project be abandoned in a high volatile areas because of the activities of these group of people? If yes, who loses? If the project can be abandoned because of the activities, who loses? And again, is it the duty of the project coordinator to have meetings with this set of people, saying what they constitute in that area? Is it the duty? For example, if some group has been categorized maybe by the police as being wanted, and now the project director goes ahead to have meetings with them, is it legal? Is it all right?
Okay.
I asked about 2-3 questions in one.
Could you isolate the 3 questions?
I said, can a project be abandoned in a very high? Okay, I think you got what I asked.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Can the project be abandoned in a high volatile area? Well, when
activities of the
yeah, before a project gets to kickstart, there are processes that the project manager is supposed to be cognizant of, supposed to be aware of them. There are things that the project manager is supposed to do before you get started. You're supposed to have a visibility study. You're supposed to find out places where you could have challenges. Okay, so if those things are not done properly from the planning stage, execution, if those things are not properly done, then you have problems. There's just no way someone would just go and start having the project in the place and never knows that that place is high volatile. Okay, so in order to avoid a situation where your project gets started and then halfway you have to abandon it and flee for your life, you have to conduct a visibility study from the onset. When you're having your planning, you have to be sure, is this place okay? Do they have what it takes for this project to run effectively? Okay, so when you're able to answer that question and then you see that it is not going to be viable, then the best thing is not to even get started in the first place, so you don't get to lose. Now, you asked again about losing. Who loses when something like that
Yes.
happens? All right, the people who get to lose are the stakeholders, because they're supposed to be part of the decision makers from the onset of the project. So if from the onset of the project, both the project manager and the stakeholders were not aware, or maybe they were aware, but they decided to go ahead with the project, then if anything goes wrong and then the project is abandoned, both the stakeholder and the project manager would get the hits. Then third, you're asking if communication with those kind of people, the people who are
Mm.
probably responsible for causing trouble in a particular area, if it is the
Yes.
duty of the project manager to communicate with them, especially when it might be illegal to have conversations with people like that.
Mm. Yeah.
Okay. So my answer to that is this: when you are aware of, it all boils down to awareness. If you're aware of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, as a project manager, it will help you know what to do and what not to do. We got to a point in course of this class when I mentioned that the policies of an organization or an area is supposed to be taken into cognizance before you get started, or before you engage in communication, or so you can be able to manage communication. So if the policies or the politics or whatever existing in that place is saying no, do not communicate with these people, there should be other channels through which communication could be effectively done. So as a project manager, you don't have to throw yourself out. You have to pass through the channels, pass through the process, because at the end of the day, these people are, they have a way, they have their way of communicating with the appropriate quotas. So you pass through that area, pass your information, it gets to them. You don't have to do it one-on-one. Okay, so you just have to be aware of what works in the area, what works for stakeholders, and what works for team members. Yeah. I hope I've been able to answer your question, Trustling.
Yeah, you have. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Trustling. So I guess this is where we're going to call it a day. This is 7:30. Yeah, 7:32. So
Okay.
I've actually had a wonderful time conversing with everyone. The class has been so interesting. I really appreciate everyone and your awesome, amazing contributions. Thank you so much. Dr. Uh, Abraham, please.
Please, I'm not a doctor yet. Tell me before. All right. All right. Thank you, everyone, for today's lecture. Please, we're going to be having a lecture tomorrow by 1 p.m., 1 to 4 p.m., and it's going to be based on project computation. That's the practical aspect. We're going to be making use of the Microsoft project professional software, how to use it to impute, to compute all your project data and variables. Please, it's very important. We also have the project Microsoft project installed on your system so that we can follow along as we do the practicals here. So please try as much as possible to get the software before tomorrow. And I think I will have to consult Dr. Banito if you can also drop a link for those who don't have so that they can also download before tomorrow. Before tomorrow, sorry. So by tomorrow, our next lecture will be tomorrow by 1 p.m. on the dot. So please, I want us to have a good night rest. I believe we have enjoyed today's lecture. Princess, we appreciate you for these wonderful lectures. And I know everyone has understood clearly all what you have taught today. And so please have a good night rest and we shall see come tomorrow by the grace of God. All right, have a good night rest, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Good night, everyone. From over here, I say good night. Enjoy a fantastic night rest and see you tomorrow. From all of us here at IIPMI, we say have a wonderful night rest. Good night.
All right. Well, first of all, the attendance. Dr. Benito is not around, but if you fill the attendance form in the afternoon, you are okay. You are very okay. You fill the attendance form in the afternoon, you're okay, or in the morning, whichever one you feel is okay. All right. So don't get worried. All right. All right. So please have a good night rest, everyone. All right. Good night. Princess, you can close the room.
Okay, closing the room now.